Oh, welcome. We're here. We've made it. This will be our 11th year of marriage. And we're here because it's been 11 years.
Oh, wow.
And we thought that we would come on here and give like some real marriage advice.
Marriage advice? Really?
Okay, I thought we'd go ahead and my first piece of advice. I know that a lot of people say like, don't go to bed angry. I would like to say go to bed angry.
Now you will go to sleep, or I will put you to sleep.
Okay, why do I say go to bed angry is because sometimes when you are feeling emotional, you may say something that may hurt someone and you haven't fully thought it through because you're in your emotions.
Yeah.
And people tell you don't go to bed angry. So then I feel like coming from like an emotional space, like sometimes people need to sleep on it to be able to like process, like what am I feeling? What do I need to say? And sometimes too, at the end of the night, you might be like angry. And let's say you just came in from the bar, you've been drinking, or you know, you've been getting high and you may not be in your rational mind. And so I say like go to bed angry, sleep on it, think about it, and then come back and process what's going on. At least that's what I've been doing. And that's why we're here. We're at 11 years because I do go to bed angry. Okay, so I wouldn't say necessarily like angry. I would use upset. I feel like I don't get angry at you, but I do get upset. So I would say when you're feeling emotional, go to bed with those emotions and then wake up and like process them in the morning. Because if you notice, majority of the time when we talk, I'm like, hey babe, so like last night I've been thinking, or I've been thinking, and it usually comes out in a much rational, even tone
fashion
versus like in my emotions, I'm coming at you.
That makes sense.
What kind of advice would you give to maybe like males or like people? Like what piece of advice would you give?
I think it is to just communicate about everything. What you want, finances, what you like, what you don't like. I think just communicate. I think if you don't talk about things, you can't figure things out together. Essentially, you're just trying to figure it out yourself. And I think as a marriage, and I want to work together versus just by yourself. I would say communicate.
So to piggyback off of that, my advice would be to have check-ins.
Yeah.
Like I think we try to have monthly check-ins. We don't always get to them. And I literally like organize them like, okay, let's check in. How are you feeling emotionally in our marriage right now? How are you feeling about the finances in our marriage right now? How are you feeling about sex right now? Because I feel like we kind of ebb and flow through life, and sometimes like there was a point like where I didn't mind like doggy style, for instance. After having 2 kids, like I had to be in like pelvic floor physical therapy, and I remember like before going into that I was like, this position like hurts me, like it like hurts me and I can't relax because like it hurts. I've had babies, my cervix is much lower, and so like being able to like check in because things like change, your likes and your dislikes. I mean, that's like, I remember at one point we had to have a check-in. I don't know if you remember this. You're like, so this is what I like when it comes to like, or do you remember that check-in?
No.
Okay, I do. I remember it. Like, what?
Somebody's upset.
Yeah, so we've had to have that conversation because I remember I had to like let you know, like, this is where the clit is. Like, do some research and like come back.
Yeah.
And then it was like some adjusting. And I was like, okay, I don't like that. That's too hard. That's too rough. She's sensitive. And so throughout that, I mean, you know, when you get into a relationship, like that person has been with someone else who may like something different. And then you get with someone else and you're like, oh, the moves I have with this person don't work on this person. I remember we kind of like had to overcome that hurdle in the beginning of when we were dating.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, his ex like this, huh? Don't do that.
I'm not that clever.
My next piece of advice is going to be, I hear this like, I feel like even as a therapist, like when I work with couples or when I work with individuals that are in relationships and are struggling, I feel like this is like the number one piece of advice that I try to tell them is it's not 50-50. And if you're trying to be 50-50, that can be in finances, that can be in emotions, it's not 50-50. Like that, I don't know who told us that lie,
Ever.
but that it's never 50-50.
Ever.
At least I don't feel like. There was a time when you made more money.
Yeah.
There was a time right now is the time I make more money. I make all the money.
Yeah.
So right now it's 100 to 0 when it comes to finances.
Yep.
And there was a point where I was a stay-at-home mom and it was like 10% to 90% because I had a part-time job. And I think that like striving to be equals is like a false expectation when it's striving to be in a partnership and figuring out like where are we right now and what does that support look like.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Marriage is definitely not 50-50. I mean, as good as it sounds or as somewhat logical as it may sound, it's never 50-50. It's always a give and take, 60-40, be 70-30, whatever. But it will never be 50-50. But marriage definitely, if your expectation is in your relationship that it's going to be 50-50, I'm not a trained professional, but I'm pretty sure you are going to be disappointed.
I'm a trained profession.
One of us is, it's
Yes,
not me.
that's me.
I think you're going to be disappointed if that's your expectation of a relationship or even a marriage. Yeah, it's just never 50-50.
Yeah. I think another piece of advice that I would give is like knowing that you have to go with the transition of who you become as you are together. Like, I'm not the same person that I was when I met you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think who you are when you first meet, especially as long as we've been together, right? People change all the time. So I think in a successful marriage, I think going with the change and being supportive with the change, I think is important. And I think where a lot of people fall apart is when they do change, the other person doesn't want them to change, right? You want the old person back or things like that. I think that is an expectation, but I don't think that's a real expectation to have, only because people change. People grow, they get smarter, they get older, they get wiser. They go through things, they like different things, don't like different things. You know, you might like one thing when you're younger, you don't like it now. I think it's just accepting each other and knowing that the changes between the two of you shouldn't bring you guys apart. I think it should keep you together, in my opinion.
I would say being able to like verbalize your needs and wants and not take things personally. And like sometimes I think we're told like, say what you need and you want, and that person should meet your needs and wants. And like sometimes you might have to constantly say what your needs and wants are and elaborate and identify them like specifically, not like, hey, I need you to help around the house more. Hey, you know what would be helpful around the house is if you did the dishes after dinner. Also, if you walked the dog, and then if you did laundry, like being specific. And then knowing like that might be one conversation. And if consistently like check in, reiterating that, but also being able to point out like, hey, I noticed that what you have been doing well is you've been doing the laundry, but I still need help with the dishes. This is what that looks like. And being able to like constantly check in and like not going at like, I already told you this, because sometimes some people need to hear things several times and like build a habit around it.
Yeah.
And not just like having one conversation and expecting that person to implement it and change. It might be multiple conversations.
But yeah, I would agree with what Shani said there. I would say being able to communicate that between each other, I think is very important. As someone, as myself, I tend to internalize a lot of things.
Yes, you do.
So I think that can be detrimental to a relationship where you don't speak your mind or speak your thoughts, and you or I would just internalize it, right? I think it myself versus hey, Shani, you know, maybe you can help with the dishes or something like that. Or like, hey, I cooked dinner, can you clean in the kitchen or something like that?
Yeah.
Versus, let's say, cooking dinner and then you end up cleaning the kitchen anyways. And instead of saying that to your partner and saying, hey, can you help clean the kitchen? You just are upset in your own mind, in your own thoughts, doing it yourself. And then your partner's looking at you like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And then you're like, nothing.
And I think as someone who is with someone who is an internalizer, like trusting like the way that you physically feel in front of them and being okay with like, hey, I'm recognizing if something's off, because they're internalizing and they may say good, because they haven't quite figured out how to verbalize it to you yet. But you can help them along in that process of like, hey, I recognize things are off. You know what? I'm going to do the dishes tonight. They may be like, no, I got it. No, I'm going to do the dishes tonight.
Tonight I do the dishes.
Because one of the things that I've found is that you will come back to me later and be like, you know what? You were right. I was irritated that day. Thank you. 11 years. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I hope that this inspires people to show up authentically in their relationships, and I hope that you got something informational from this video today, and I wanted to let you know I appreciate you, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Deuces.